we've talked a little bit about the data from the DCJS, the Department of Criminal Justice Services, that indicate that in 2011, 5 people were killed with a rifle. Do you know how many of those 5 murders with a rifle involved an assault weapon?
I don't know, I'm sorry.
The data from DCJS also indicated that there were 393 murders with a handgun. Do you know how many of those handguns would be affected by this ban?
I don't know.
The governor mentioned in, I believe in the State of the State message, that he thought there were 1 million people that own these kinds of guns. Is that the number that you're familiar with as well?
I don't think he came up with that number out of the air. I think the state police and DCJS probably gave him the best information they have at their disposal now.
So you think 1 million is a reasonable estimate of how many gun owners that will be affected by this legislation?
I'll take him at his word.
I would as well. If we have 1 million of these gun owners out there with these guns, but only 5 murders were committed last year, statistically, aren't these guns much, much safer than cars or motorcycles or bicycles?
We registered them too.
Well, we haven't registered bicycles yet. That was proposed last year, but we didn't go forward with it. But I mean, statistically, that's a very, very small number of deaths with 1 million of these owners out there, isn't it?
As far as I'm concerned, 1 death is too many.
Well, I would agree. And you know, last week, or a few weeks ago, we saw repeated news coverage of people who were killed by subways in New York City, as you know. And those were tragedies, too. I mean, innocent people pushed on the tracks by someone who is not mentally stable. And in fact, Kendra's Law was named after that kind of situation, right?
Yes, it was.
As you know, the New York Times reported that 55 people were killed by subways in New York City last year. 11 times more people were killed by subways than by a rifle. That would suggest that subways are a lot more dangerous than rifles.
I still have no problem using a subway, though. I have a problem with somebody coming down the street with an assault weapon, though.
Well, and I agree, you know, and we're all concerned about that. If this legislation were in effect, say, a month ago, would it have prevented what happened at Webster?
At where?
At Webster.
Webster. No, I don't think so.
Do you think if this legislation were in effect here in New York State a month ago, it would have prevented what happened in Sandy Hook, Connecticut?
No.
As you know, the Columbine tragedy, which was a horrific tragedy, of course, that occurred.
I mean, let me amend that statement, because Sandy Hook could have been prevented if you know, the parent was the one who owned the weapons.
Well, the parent did own the weapons in Sandy Hook.
Yes, the parent owned the weapons, and under the safe storage provision of this bill, it might have been locked up as a result of, you know, if the child had disability, mental disability issues that were known to the parent, there might have been a requirement for that weapon to be locked up.
Well, as you know, the safe storage provisions under this bill aren't triggered by a parent knowing that their child has mental issues. It's triggered by very specific criteria, right? Yeah, it's
right.
Institutionalized. None of those criteria applied in Sandy Hook, did they?
That's true. So I said maybe.
Okay.
There was a possibility that, you know, maybe there are things that we yet don't know about.
Now, Senator Gillibrand was quoted a few weeks ago saying that, according to FBI statistics, 90% of the guns recovered in New York City in crime scenes came from outside of New York State, and 70% upstate. Is that your understanding as well? So what we're talking about is dealing with 5 rifles, of which statistically 4 of them would have come from outside the state anyway. So we're talking about maybe dealing with 1 murder?
Where
And
are
this
they?
is the necessity that causes us to get bills at midnight. I'm sorry, I apologize.
It's all right. You know, there are a lot of unsolved killings that we don't know how they occurred.
Can I ask